we're going to start working on the doors next. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that your layer is set to your door layer. That should be the magenta layer. And for the doors, we're going to put in real simple doors. And when I say simple, I mean this is really, really simple, because really all you do is draw a line across the door. For exterior doors, at least, it's going to be on the inside of the door. And then for interior doors, it's going to be on whichever side the door opens. So for instance, generally wherever you see a small wall, that is going to be the determining factor on which side the door opens on. So the door over here is going to open like that. Now we're not going to just leave the doors as is like this. We're going to actually rotate them and show them as doors. And this just allows you to learn the rotate command, which isn't anything special. We simply click on the door, right click, choose rotate. Now I want you to specify the base point. So that's the base point of the rotation. So you should click on the point where the door is going to be fixed to the wall, and then simply rotate the door. You know, in this case, my polar tracking I think is set up for 15 degrees. So my rotation allows me to select a rotation every 15 degrees. So I'm just going to set this one at 15 degrees here, which is actually shows up as 345, and leave it like that. So this door, I'm going to do the same thing too. I'm going to click on it. And again, so this door will rotate this way. And the reason you have this little wall is so when you rotate when the door is completely open, you have a space for the door to actually occupy that won't block the doorway. If we didn't have this wall, then, well, first of all, the door couldn't really fully open. And when it did, it wouldn't open enough to allow you to have the full opening. In this case, essentially you really get the full opening, or just about the full opening. So again, here the pivot point will be here. So we right click, choose rotate, choose the pivot point right there, and then we just rotate the door. And we can rotate this one, say 60 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to let you go through and add the rest of the doors. I've already done so. That's why I set up this drawing so you couldn't see the rest of them. So you can go ahead, and when you're done, your door should look something like this. Now this particular opening, the presumption is there isn't actually a door there, that it's just an opening from one room to the other. The small wall here is generally the indication that a door exists, and where there isn't one, it's likely that there probably isn't a door. Certainly there could be, but let's assume that there isn't. Okay, so you can go ahead and pause this and start the recording again, or excuse me, the video again, when you've finished putting the rest of the doors in. Okay, so now let's go and add some windows. Now for the windows, you can refer to the drawing on page 428. And if you look at this drawing, there are actually two different types of windows. There are both 4-foot windows and 5-foot windows. So we're going to have to create some windows. So let's go through and we're going to select the window layer. And to create a 5-foot window, we're going to first create a little 5-inch block. So we're going to type, so let me go back a sec. I'm going to start with a rectangle. Just choose a start point. I'm going to do this away from the actual house or the floor plan. So I'm going to start a block, and then I'm just going to type at 5, 5. So now what I'm going to do, I have this block. Copy. It wants a base point. I can choose any base point. And I'm just going to make some copies. So 1, 2, 3 copies. So now I have four of these little blocks. Now each one, remember, is 5 inches by 5 inches. Of course, the 5 inches, remember, is so that it'll fit nicely directly on our wall. So if we want to make a 5-foot window, let's take one of these blocks. Let's say we'll start with this block. We know that we're going to have 5 inches on one end, 5 inches on the other. That means we're going to have a length of 4 feet and 2 inches in between. Now before we do that, what we want to do is let's go back into Tools and our drafting settings and go to our Object Snap, and let's add a midpoint grab bar. So what that does is when we start to draw a line, we can draw a line from the midpoint. So here from the midpoint here, we're going to start to draw a line, and we're going to make a line now that's 4 feet, 2 inches long. And actually, let's go up to this one over here, hit our mouse button, and let's make a line that's 3 feet, 2 inches long for our 4-foot window. Now all we have to do, select this, right click, choose Move. Now when we want to choose the base point, we want to choose the midpoint here, and then we want to move it to the end of that line. And then we want to do the same thing with this block. So we select the block, choose Move. So it wants the base point. So the base point we want to choose as the middle of the left-hand side. And then we want to move the block to the end of that line. So we just created a couple of windows. We can check lengths. Again, it's always a good idea to check. And we're showing up as 5.5 feet 1. And we can see what happened here. We're actually over an inch. So we need to select this. Choose Move. Select our midpoint and just move it over. Select. Move. Select our midpoint. and then move it over. And let's confirm we are exactly 5 feet. And then we can come over here and check the other one. Make sure we're at 4 feet. Start there. Click. And we end, and we see we're at 4 feet. Okay, so as we look at our windows, we also have both horizontal and vertical windows. So far, we've only made horizontal windows. So what we can do is we can actually take these windows and rotate them. So we'll just take a copy of both windows. This selection. Choose base point. So I'm going to choose the base point down here. And I'm going to move it up here. And I believe I can do this where I can actually rotate as I'm moving. Maybe not. I'm going to choose copy. My base point. I'll move these here. And I'm just checking my windows here. Actually, it looks like we only have 2 4-foot windows, and they're both vertical. And then for the 5-foot windows, we have 1 horizontal, 3 horizontal and 2 vertical. So for 4-foot windows, we can just rotate these two. Our 2 4-foot windows. So let's take this, rotate, choose a point to rotate on. And here we can actually type an angle. So let's just type 90 degrees because we want it at exactly 90. And we certainly don't want it on top of another window. So we're going to move it over here. Now, probably it would have been better to actually not do a copy and do the copy after the rotate. So I'm going to just take this and copy it again. I'm going to do a copy. And it doesn't really matter where I copy from. And I'll do that. So now we have two vertical 4-foot windows. Right now we have 3 horizontal 5-foot windows, which is actually what we need. So we can leave those as they are. Although we do need to rotate one so we can make some vertical windows. And we're going to need 2 vertical windows. So let's take this one, rotate it, specify a base point. So we'll specify this base point. And let's rotate it this way so that it doesn't conflict. And as I said, we need 2 of these. So make a second one. Again, we can choose any base point for the copy. Oh, and actually I said we had 3 of the 5-foot. We only had 2. This is the remaining 4-foot, which we won't need and we can delete. So now we have our 2 verticals and 3 horizontals. So we can copy, choose any base point, paste, and paste. All right, so now we have all our windows. Now we could have taken these windows and placed them closer to where we need to, but I elected to put them all here as a starting point. So the next thing we need to do with these windows is we want to group the individual components. Right now, remember, these are all individual pieces, so we have 2 blocks and a line in between them. So what we do is we select the window, and then we can go ahead and select group, and then group the part. What that does is that allows us to do this. Because if, for instance, I just come over here and click and try to move, you can see I only move one piece, which isn't very useful. I'd like to move the whole piece. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is that you can't do this before you do the copies, because for some reason, at least that's my memory of it, or my recollection. And I'm going to check that just to be sure. So, okay, so this is grouped. This is one piece. But I have a recollection that if I do a copy of this, and I could be wrong, check the base point and paste it there. Oh, I guess I am wrong. For some reason, I had thought that if you group them first and then did a copy, it turned out that you could not, it actually ungrouped itself, but I guess it doesn't. In any event, we're going to go through and group all of these. So it would have been quicker to group first. But this certainly is not difficult to do. And I also presume that somewhere up here there is also a group button that you could use, which is probably, it looks just like that. You're welcome to go find it, should you desire. Okay, so now all of our windows are grouped. We can now go place the windows. Now the nice thing about these windows is that they actually now have, because we put in the midpoint grip, is they become very easy to place. And there's several ways that you can do this, and whatever works for you is best. But let's go place the first I guess I have a couple up here I still have to no, I do not have to place those. These we don't use, correct? Right, because these are 4-foot windows that we don't use. If I count my windows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 windows we are not using, so I'm just going to go and delete them. Okay, so we have a 5-foot vertical window that's being placed here. We have a 5-foot vertical window that's being placed here. I'm just going to place the windows in their approximate locations. And let's see, we have 4-foot window here and 4-foot window here. No window in the bathroom in this house. All right, So windows are very roughly placed, not even on the walls yet. Now, very interestingly enough, if you look at this section right here, you can see that this 5-foot window is actually being placed exactly in the middle. 5'9" on either side. So we can, because we have a grip here, and we're going to have a midpoint section there, we can move this over, place it like this. Now it's not fully placed yet, and the reason for that is because the grips don't line up, because this is in the center of our wall. So we're off by 2.5 inches. So we can then move it again and just get a vertical line and then type 2.5 and move it up. What we should then do is actually check it from there to here, and we can see that we're 5.9 inches over. Excuse me, 5 feet 9 inches over. So this is actually placed properly. So the actual method that you use to place these is really totally up to you. When we go to place the second one, let's see, is that also centered? So we see that it's 12 feet 4 inches is the spacing between these two walls. And the window wants to be centered from 6.6 feet 4 from here. Now this 12 feet 4 12 feet 4, if we add another 5 inches, we'll get 12 feet 9. And 6.4 is not half of 12'9". So it's not quite directly in the center. So how do we go about placing this? Well, there's a couple of ways we can do it. One is we can start by placing the end point right on our corner, like this. And then we can do a move. And when we want to move this, or in order to move this, we know we want to move this 2.5 inches in the X, so we can type at 2.5, comma, six feet 4. And you see I actually put 2.5. So let's try that again. So we want to do a move, and we want to move from the center point at 2.5, comma, 6 feet 4 inches. and we can see that we move that up. So again, we should check it. Midpoint, we see it 6 feet 4 inches up. Now we can do the same thing for the top window here. So we can move this directly to this corner. And then again, move from the corner. And then here we'll be at 2.5, comma, minus 6 feet 4 inches. This one in the center will be 15 feet over. So we could center this like this if you're able to place it properly. Make sure that it's centered. And then once you do that, move it again from this point, and then simply move it over 15. And again, I just did 15 inches. So we select it again. Move from the midpoint. Make sure you get a tracking line in the right direction, 15 feet. Now, if you can't get it placed exactly so that your blocks, your window end blocks line up with the walls, you can move it from the corner, and then you just move it at 15, comma, minus 2.5. We see here that's placed. Now this window is going to be 3 feet 8 inches down. So let's select the window. I'm going to move it. Move it to the corner. So 3 feet, we have to move it 3 feet 8 inches down. So we're going to move, select the base point again, which is the middle, and then we're going to do at minus 2.5, comma, minus 3 feet 8 inches. Oops, that places that one. We'll come down to this side, and now we're 5 feet 6 inches. So again, we'll move this right to the corner. Move. Now at this point, I'm not sure if, yeah, I guess that is right on the corner. Okay, move midpoint at minus 2.5, comma, 5 feet 6 inches. That moves it to there. And then finally our last window is 7.5 inches from this corner. So we'll first move it. Directly to the corner. Right click on the mouse, choose move. Choose the base point, which is going to be the center point, or the end, the corner point, which is actually the midpoint. And then we're going to do at minus 7 feet, 5 inches, comma, 2.5. And then we're going to just go ahead and wrong. Let's go ahead and just check this last one, and we can see we've moved over 7 feet, 5 inches. So now if we zoom out, we can see we now have the drawing with doors and windows. Now, as you can imagine, we could take this plan and we could put multiple layers on here. So we could add layers for electrical, we could add layers for plumbing, we could add layers for HVAC. And then what we would do is we would just turn off different layers. So for instance, if we were giving this to, I don't know, to the electrician, maybe we wouldn't want them to see the doors. So we could just turn off the door layer, and then the doors wouldn't show up. Of course, for doors, that's not necessarily that important, but you wouldn't necessarily want to give your framers, let your framers know where all the HVAC is going or where all the plumbing is going. You wouldn't want to complicate your electricians by telling them where all the plumbing is going, or vice versa. So you can imagine on a drawing, you could take lots and lots of information, and you actually essentially stack it in different layers. So you wouldn't go ahead and say take this floor plan and lay it out 5 different times if you had 5 different prints. You would only lay it out once. Now you might have a separate copy of this floor plan for, let's say, the second floor. So if I had a second floor version of this, I might over here somewhere have the existing outside outline if the second floor had the same outside outline, but the inside might look completely different because we would have walls in different places. So in a given print, you might have both one drawing that can be broken up into multiple versions, and then also multiple drawings that can be themselves broken up into even more versions. So you can have lots and lots of different versions. And when you come in, when you're talking about buildings, ultimately a complete building will exist in a single AutoCAD drawing. So you can imagine there could be, essentially hundreds of different drawings, and each of those drawings could have many different layers. Okay, so with that said, I would like you to go ahead and dimension this drawing based on what you see on page 428. There are a couple of things you do not have to dimension. You do not have to dimension the windows at being 4 feet or 5 feet everywhere. We already know that. You've created that. And you also do not have to dimension, I think, the tub. The tub is shown dimensioned in this drawing. But otherwise, please go ahead and dimension this drawing and put the dimensions in. I'm not going to dimension this for you. You should be able to do that. However, there is one thing I am going to go over. I'm going to do a couple of dimensions for you, because initially your dimension setup is going to be wrong. And I'll show you why. Let's put in a dimension. So if I just choose my dimension, choose a dimension here, and I'm just going to choose this corner. Before I do that, let's go through and add a dimension layer. Let's go to a layer. Add dimensions. And let's make this layer, let's see, what color have we not used yet? We can make that one dark blue. So our dimension layer will be dark blue. choose that corner. I didn't first choose my dimension layer. Okay, so, well, first of all, this is a little difficult to see because it's dark blue, but that's okay because you will be able to see it once we get to the paper space. However, a couple of problems. When you click on it, or I guess you can't really click on it, it doesn't help. When you hover over it, you see the little white there? That is your text size. That's your text, which you can't even see. And the reason you can't see it is because it's incredibly tiny. This goes back to AutoCAD remembering and sort of setting up what we were using for dimensions before. So we need to go into our tools, our view, and set our dimension style. Now again, we can also set it right from here, or we can set it from our annotation here. It's all in the same place. We can set dimension style here, click it there to set it, or click it here to set it. So I'll just click it here. And we'll just go to standard, modify, primary units should be architectural. I'm a little bit surprised. I thought the architectural would have been set up when we did the quick drawing settings. That has me a bit surprised. Our fraction format is 0, 0. Again, we're not using fractions of inches. We're only using up to inches. So that's fine there. Into our fit doesn't matter. Arrowheads, or symbols and arrows. Architects use these things called architectural ticks. If you look at the dimensions shown on the page, what you see is you see that the lines go right to the dimension line, and then there's sort of a crossing line. That's called an architectural tick. So that's exactly what we're going to use, these architectural ticks. Text. So here text height is 1/4 of an inch. Remember this print size. From one side to one side, 30 feet. From this corner to the corner up here is 30 feet. So a text height of 1/4 inch is a bit small. I believe I remember this, that 9 inches is a reasonably good text size to use. So you want to set the text size to 9 inches. Click OK. Click Close. And now you can see your text size is more readily readable. The final thing is to remember, of course, that this is going to need to be moved out. Because you do need to put your dimensions in for the window locations. So I'll actually finish this side up. So we're going to dimension from here to there. And I really hate this dark blue. So let's change it. And let's make it yellow. Hopefully we'll be able to see. Hopefully we'll be able to see the yellow when we get to the layout page. I don't know if we have a viewport over there yet. And oh, I guess we do. And we can see that we can't see the yellow in the viewport. So yellow is not a good choice either. Use green. We've used all of those colors. So we could use a light gray. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. That's visible. Looks fair. All right, so we'll choose the light gray. And if we look in the model space, that's okay as well. Okay, so taking a look here again, maybe you've noticed, maybe you haven't. Our architectural ticks are much, much too small. So we have to go back and change those. So we're going to click here, modify, symbols and arrows. They call this arrow size, but our arrowhead is really an architectural tick. So what it really means is architectural tick size. Now, I don't know the exact size that we need to use. I'm going to try for 6 inches and see how that looks. We can always come back and change it. So close, close. Yeah, and 6 inches looks fairly reasonable. So we'll choose that. All right, so we need to put the next dimension in. Now, actually, I want to point out something I did wrong with the dimension. I didn't point it out as I did it, but I do want to point it out now. When I chose this dimension, I actually clicked, of course, on the center of the window, that's actually sort of okay, because you have to do that because that's where the midpoint is. You don't have a portion of the window that's out here. But I also did that down here. And so what do you see? Well, so what you see is you see the dimension overlapping the drawing. You need to change this. So what you should do is you should click on the grip and move it up to the end of the drawing, or the end of the wall, like that. And then there should actually be a space. And this also is quite small. And we should modify that as well, between the wall and the dimension itself. So let's go back to the dimension, modify it. And this is the dimension break. And the way we can tell is, let's make it larger. So let's make this 6, which I know is way too large. Linear jog dimension, jog height factor. And maybe this. I forget which number it is. It's one of these two. All right, so let's leave that as 1.5, and let's change this, not to 6, because 6 is actually quite large, but let's make it 4, and let's see if that's the right. No, that didn't change at all. Let's come back, modify. Linear jog dimension, jog height factor. Not in fit. Ah, here it is, lines. In lines, extend beyond dimension lines. So here it is again, 1/4 of an inch. And you'll see this if I type a 6 here. I believe you'll see this jump out. Maybe not. But let's put a 4 in there. Hit OK. Close. That didn't do it either. Let's see what is changing. Well, let's see what this distance is. And that'll hopefully help us determine what we need to change. We start here and we go to there. We can't actually specify a second point. We can draw a little line here. Doesn't matter there. And then draw a little line. Oh, and it went in the wrong direction. Delete. We should be able to gauge it. This is 5 inches. That line is less than a quarter of an inch or less. So it is probably a quarter of an inch. So somewhere in here there's a quarter of an inch setting. It might be this offset from origin. Yes. Do you see that? How when I changed it, how these moved way out of the way? Now it looks crazy here, but moving this out by 4 inches here, actually 4 inches might be a little large because that's going to move it out about there. Let's go back to modify here. And we're going to let's move this to 2 inches. Keep it a little farther away than it was. Okay, so I'm a little bit perplexed because this is 2 inches. This is 5 inches. And now this supposedly is 2 inches. I have no explanation for that. Unless we're combining the two and we just made it 6. But let's try that. Nope. If we go to 1. One is a little bit larger than we like. I'm sorry about taking all the time for this. Sometimes things don't come out exactly as you like them. All right, so let me go 0.5 inches. And 0.5 inches essentially went back down to 0. So I put 1.5 inches. Now it appears that it's correct. Okay, so I don't have any explanation. That looks like an AutoCAD bug. I don't think I was typing anything incorrectly. But if I set that to 2.5 inches, that looks pretty reasonable. So anyway, as I was saying, you don't want these to actually touch. And by default, these now will not. If you set them up so that they end at the line, they'll be offset by a little bit. Okay, so we can come up to the top dimension here, finish up. You can actually, I could hit the mouse button here, but then I'll have to move the dimension line. But what I can do is I can take a tracking line and then not hit the mouse button till here, and then bring the dimension out this way. And I just put that on the wrong layer. So let's correct that. And let's just do it this way. Put it on dimensions. And then this dimension in between here, you need to make both dimensions, of course, the same. The same length or the same extension. And again, I still forgot to change it, but we can change that afterwards. I'm going to move this to here. Leave it in dimensions. Click on this. Back in dimensions. Okay, so now that we're here, we can move that so that the dimensions are on top of each other, and then we have to take this dimension and move it back so that the dimension lines are directly on top of each other. And that's how you set up the dimensions. Now, as you can see here, those are way too close. There are two things you can do. One is you can move this out, which we probably should do. The second is you probably could make this text a little bit smaller. So let's go back to our dimension style and then go into text, and we were at 9 inches. We could probably do 6 inches. Yeah, that's probably okay for dimension size. Okay, so anyway, it's up to you to go ahead and finish all the dimensioning on this drawing. And the new video we'll talk about bushes, and then we'll get into the facade.